wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Fuad Kassab. Hey everyone, welcome to A Quirky Journey. I am here with two of my good friends, Leah.
Hello.
And Chantal. Hi. We're just doing an intro from the Together retreat that Hope for Health have been holding up in Darwin, well, near Darwin, about 45 minutes out of Darwin. So we've been here cooking all week and we're at the end of the week. The participants have just gone home and we're tidying up and packing up, and we've got sore feet, but we had a lot of fun. So, yes, I thought I'll get the girls on the intro with me and we'll have a chat about what we've been doing this week. So, yeah, what did you guys love best about our week?
Well, obviously food is a big one. We all love food. It was, really nice to introduce some people to some of the types of recipes that sort of we make from the book that they haven't had before, and just to see how excited they were about the flavours.
And how good they were feeling. There was, I remember one of the participants was saying that, it's not, I don't think it was quite the kind of food he usually has at home, but he was saying that he felt so much energy. Oh, Kane was saying, he was feeling so much energy. And I think he was only here for the last 4 days. Yep. And, he was saying he didn't feel like he needed lunch. It's just when you get that really nourishing food in, you don't eat as much and you've got more energy. So why wouldn't you do it?
And I loved actually having your recipes cooked from your book rather than when I cook them. I don't have any of the ingredients and I just make it up as I go. And I'm like, I just cooked Joe's crumble and it probably didn't have apples in it.
Oh no, you're one of those people. You get these questions like, Joe, I made your recipe and it was really bad. It didn't work at all. Oh, did you use... and I always know when people say that, I'm like, did you actually use blanched almond meal? Did you use this many eggs? What did you change? Oh, yeah, I didn't have blanched almond meal, so I changed that to this meal, and I didn't have this, and I didn't have enough eggs, and so... But that, Chantal, you said your recipes usually work. They're just different. They're your recipes then.
Exactly.
Actually, that's how I cook generally. I don't follow my own recipes much. But I think we had a few days where we had to make do with whatever we had, especially towards the end. And it was like, okay, swap that for that. And
it all worked
It's all fine. Yeah, everyone went home happy and full, so that's good. But, I think the most exciting thing was seeing people get a few light bulb moments with health as well, and they had some really good workshops with the practitioners and with Helen Patteran, and they learned all sorts of things, everything from healing food to just lifestyle changes and how to ferment their own veggies and how to personality, looking into their personalities.
Osteopathic treatments.
All the
cultural stuff, obviously.
And then all the cultural stuff was just amazing. You've probably heard about the Weston A Price Foundation, but just in case you haven't, I'll give you a little bit of a let me see. I'll give you a little bit of a background on it. If you haven't heard of the Weston A Price Foundation, this was begun by a dentist. Well, actually, Weston A. Price was a dentist in the 1930s who travelled the world to study indigenous cultures and to see why they had such beautiful teeth and jaws when they were eating their traditional foods, and how it changed when they moved over to Western foods, so refined foods. And the differences were really amazing, and even in one generation, sometimes in one family, when they changed over to Western foods and had all the refined sugar and flours there, not only their health would degenerate, but also their teeth and jaw lines. And so he, as a dentist, was studying these cultures all over the world and recording what he learnt. And the Weston A. Price Foundation takes his studies and helps people to see how traditional foods are healing and what foods we need to get back into our diets. So basically they say that they're committed to food, farming and the healing arts. And it's a non-profit group that's dedicated to restoring nutrient-dense foods to the human diet through education, research and activism. It supports a number of movements that contribute to this objective, including accurate nutrition instruction, organic and biodynamic farming, pasture feeding of livestock, community-supported farms, honest and informative labelling, prepared parenting and nurturing therapies. So the lady that I'm interviewing today, Hilda Gore, is a part of the Weston A. Price Foundation in America. And she also has a podcast called the Wise Tradition Podcast, which you may have heard of. It's a really awesome podcast, so go and have a listen if you haven't. She's got a YouTube channel as well. And I'll put all the links to those in the show notes. Let me just tell you a little bit about Hilda. She has, I've already said that she has a podcast, sorry. She's an integrative nutrition health coach, a fitness professional, and the DC Metro Regional Director for Body and Soul Fitness. She lives in Washington, DC with her husband Mitch and their children and their cat and dog. So Hilda's actually going to be in Australia in September. She's going to be in Australia and she'll be travelling around in September, October, speaking at lots of events and things like indigenous food feasts. There's development of children through nutrient-dense foods talks. There's back to traditional farming talks. She's going to be up in my area doing a talk on the oldest foods on earth. So that's going to be cool. And I may be going with her to Elcho Island
very exciting
in September. So that's going to be so cool for a week to visit the people there. The people that we've met here, the Yolngu people from the retreat. So that'll be awesome. So I'm going to move on to the interview now. I hope you enjoy it. And thanks so much, girls, for being on the intro with me.
Thank you.
Chat to you all soon. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited today to have Hilda on the show. Hi, Hilda.
Hey, Jo. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being on the show. Your podcast is amazing and I've had so many people recommend it to me. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today. We're really interested in hearing about your upcoming visit to Australia and what you'll be doing. And also I'd love to know how you first got involved with the Weston A. Price Foundation. For people who are just new to the Weston A. Price Foundation, maybe you could give us a bit of a background on it and a bit of your story about how you got started with the foundation.
Absolutely. Let me think where to start. I love telling the story of Dr. Price. I'll start with him.
Yes, do that.
Because he is a phenomenal person. So he lived in the 1930s and 40s, and he was actually a Canadian who moved to the United States and had a dental practice in Ohio.
Okay.
So here he is, treating all these children especially, and he was saddened and perplexed that so many of them had cavities and crowded teeth and poor behavior and, compromised health. And while he's treating these kids, he's getting National Geographic magazine, which is a worldwide magazine, I'm sure you've heard of it, with these beautiful photographs of people around the world. And he couldn't help but compare the people in other parts of the world who looked amazing, who had no crowded teeth, who looked healthy and strong, vital and vibrant. And he thought, something's wrong here. And he loved their teeth too. He could see these broad smiles, and he's a dentist, so he's looking for these things.
Okay. I didn't know that's how he first started thinking about that. That's
totally. And so then he thought, okay, first I want to know, do these people really exist? These amazing, hale and hearty people. And second of all, if they do exist, what are they eating? He was very curious about that connection. And so what he decided to do was to take it upon himself to do a world tour. And his wife said, I'm going with you. I'm making up that part of the story. But the point is, she was not left behind. She went with him. And let me tell you, Jo, this was not I'm going to jump on JetBlue and, go to another country right now. It was a harder time, but he found his way to Alaska, to South Pacific Islands to New Zealand to Australia to Kenya to Switzerland. He went many places over the course of 10 years. And what he discovered is that people had all kinds of different diets, as you can imagine. So in Switzerland, it was all dairy and butter and bread, sourdough bread and stuff like that. And then on this island off the coast of Scotland, it was fish and stuffed oats and, just like all these different things. And in Alaska, it was whale blubber and seal oil. So he was carefully taking notes because he wasn't really just a dentist. He was a researcher, and he was documenting what he saw. And what he found was that there were many principles in common of these varied diets. And he made a list of them. And that is the foundation for the Weston A. Price Foundation. In other words, we think that what he found was so important that we want to eat in this kind of wise traditions way, as we call it. And those principles are true throughout the world, and they're good for us today. And I can go into those in just a little bit. But what happened for me personally is I was actually born with a birth defect. My mother, when she was pregnant with me, got exposed to the German measles. And the doctor said to her, your baby is going to be born with something really wrong with it, And so she was concerned. But when I was born, it was a birth defect, but it was just a small hole in my heart between the lower two ventricles. So it was repaired by open heart surgery when I was 9. And I think that kind of shaky start to my life, where I didn't know how long I was going to live. The doctors didn't want me to be too active because, they wanted to monitor that hole. They were afraid it was going to get bigger, and all these things kind of informed why I take care of my body today and why I want to help others do the same. So that's a little bit about my story. And I came to the foundation through a friend, and I was like, this makes total sense to me. And I started changing my diet over into this wise traditions way of living, and I've never looked back.
That's awesome. So when you first heard about Weston A. Price, were you already eating a healthy diet, or did you have to work into changing your diet, or how did you work into eating that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was a fitness professional. I still am. I love teaching exercise classes. It's really fun for me. And I thought it doesn't matter what you eat, just work it off, That was my philosophy. I thought I was eating healthy because I was following kind of the USDA food guidelines, which said, eat a lot of carbs and grains and, a little bit of protein, but a lot of fruits and vegetables. I was eating that way. But what I found, Joe, I would get so shaky. I would feel my blood sugar drop.
I was exactly the same.
Were you? Yeah. So I'd be in the middle of my exercise class, literally teaching a song. And then I would be like, oh my gosh, I've got to eat something. So I would grab a protein bar or whatever I had. And then my, blood sugar would go back up. I'd be fine. And I thought, well, I guess I'm just one of those people that needs to eat all the time.
That was me.
Right? It's a lot of people. Then I found out when you eat real whole foods and things that can sustain you and that aren't so packaged and processed, your body can go much longer. So now I'll have, for example, for breakfast, bacon and eggs or some full fat yogurt. And it's just a whole different ballgame. That can take me till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. If I didn't stop to eat because I really wanted to, I could keep going. So I ate healthy as far as I understood it. But then I gradually, what I did when I found out about these principles, and I can go over the principles in just a minute, but as I started slowly. Some people are like, clean out the cupboard starting today. We're never touching another pretzel, But I took my time because there weren't any presenting health issues. So I just was like, you know what? We're going to start to eat butter. And so we brought butter to the table. And then the next year, literally, it was like one thing a year. It was less chips, and my family loved it because it tasted great. And I suddenly, as I'm saying, felt my endurance and I was able to sustain my, blood sugar levels and all that much easier. And even though I was always feeling healthy, I just felt better than ever. So that's how I started to change things over time.
I think most people need to go the slow approach. I did. Some people jump in gung-ho, but maybe you can give us an overview of the kinds of foods that Weston A. Price really recommends and what the Wise Traditions diet is based on.
Oh, absolutely. So this is the cool thing. Dr. Price noticed that these indigenous healthy people were eating the foods of their region, obviously whatever was accessible to them. The reason the Kenyans were having meat and milk and blood from the goats and the cows is because they weren't really growing crops, and they weren't near a river or an ocean to eat fish. So that was their diet. So I think the first thing is to really eat whole, real foods according to what's available in your region, and to avoid what he called denatured or processed foods. So for us today, this is very clear. You can tell when a tomato came off the vine as opposed to something that's canned in the grocery store, or a sauce that's got all these spices that someone else processed. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the idea is to avoid the refined or denatured foods, because Dr. Price was able to contrast those who still ate their traditional way with those who did have access to the modern foods of their time, which included refined flour and sugar and some oils. And he could see the degeneration of their health. Like, he wrote a whole book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Yeah. All you have to do is flip through those pictures or go to the westonaprice.org website, and you'll see some of these images of the indigenous people who ate their traditional wise traditions diet and those who had already shifted. And immediately with the next generation, you would get the crowding of the teeth, more cavities, compromised posture, eyesight, hearing. It was amazing that it was so clear cut.
Yeah, it's so interesting that it could happen in one generation, eh?
Yeah, in one generation. And for those immediately eating the foods, there was a change. I'll tell you a quick story. I believe it was in Kenya, where he was observing some different tribes, and he noticed everybody was hale and hearty with the broad smiles and, the beautiful facial structure, which again is a hint of the wellness of the whole body.
Right.
And then he met a man who was like toothless and he seemed overweight. And he found out that man was the cook for the white people.
Oh, yeah.
He was the chef. And so he was eating the displacing foods of modern commerce.
Oh, isn't that sad?
It's so sad. So his healthy living and good health is really our birthright. And what we want to see at the Weston Price Foundation, and for myself too, as Holistic Hilda, I want to see people return to the health that is kind of their God-given right, if you will. And so that's the first principle, is actually avoiding the refined and denatured foods and returning to the whole, real foods. Another principle is, this is very surprising, is that all traditional cultures consume some sort of animal food. Yeah. So Dr. Price thought he would find some vegetarian, or primarily plant-based diets. Everybody had some sort of animal food in their diet. And this really surprised him. It was actually disappointing to him. He thought, surely there are people out here. No. So what that means is, I think we all should be unafraid. And as a matter of fact, we should embrace animal products in our diet for well-being. There are a lot of, everyone touts the vitamins and minerals and plants, and it's not quite the same. What you get from animal foods are the real deal. And in some of the plants, you only get a precursor. I'll give carrots as an example. People will say, well, carrots are a great source of vitamin A. Well, actually, they have beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A, but they don't contain vitamin A. So what that means is your body has to work hard to convert it. Whereas if you're eating an animal product, you will get that vitamin A right away. It's already been converted for you by the animal. And that's kind of part of the cycle of life. But they also honor the whole animal. And I'll conclude with this, and then we can talk about whatever else you want. But
no, you're right. Keep going. This is interesting.
Oh, thank you. They would eat it nose to tail.
Yes.
So they would eat the organ meats, which are actually super nutrient dense. And mostly when we think of meat, at least in the US, we think of the muscle meat, I'm going to have some hamburger or some steaks. But the liver and the brain and the heart, these organs are much more nutrient dense. So they would eat all those pieces and bits, and then they would also take the bones and make bone broth and, all kinds of stock. And so you'd be getting the richness from the collagen and the connective tissue. And, so you'd get, they took advantage of all of it, and they were all the better for it. And so we have to kind of work to understand this with our palates today and our way of thinking. But you can see where this is actually a healthy way to live. If you go to the grocery store and just buy chicken breasts, what happened to the rest of that chicken? Yeah. It's kind of not very wise, right? But if you buy the whole chicken from a farmer, or goodness sakes, if you hens in your backyard, then, you're honoring the whole animal and taking advantage of all that it has to offer you. And so it's really a beautiful thing, and it's eco-friendly. Again, some people go vegetarian or vegan because they think it's better for the planet, but in actuality, a lot of land has to be tilled to give enough vegetables even for one vegetarian, let alone, tons. Whereas the animals, when they are on the land, they can regenerate it through their manure and their urine, and then they're kind of bringing new life where there was none. So it's a beautiful thing. And I've done actually some podcasts on it. People can just go to the Wise Traditions podcast and listen to some of the episodes I've done with Alan Savory. I've interviewed Joel Salatin, who's a well-known farmer.
He's awesome, isn't he? We interviewed him as well.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah. So they all talk to this bit about using animals not only for our own nutrition, but to kind of harness the hooves for the well-being of the planet.
Yeah, we're totally in agreement with that. So when, do you want to talk about fermented food at all? Did he study that as well?
Well, interestingly, I can't tell you how many principles he came up with. I'll have to revisit that in his book. But I do know that the foundation has 11. Okay. And the reason they have 11 is because they did further study. Right. And they were the ones that noticed that traditional peoples all had ferments in their diet. Yeah. So I don't know that that was something that stood out to Dr. Price, but we started to notice it. And it's kind of cool because this trend is on the upswing in the U.S. I hope it is in Australia as well. That we're realizing our gut microbiome is key to our health. And so what you want to do is take in ferments one way or another. You can have it through drinks like kombucha or mead, some fermented drink, or you could have kefir or yogurt, and then of course there's sauerkraut and kimchi. There's, foods all around the world. And I guess again, you have to look and see what's local to your area and what makes sense. But these things are so rich in probiotics that they kind of repopulate the gut with healthy bacteria. And you always want to have a good balance in your gut with the good bacteria outnumbering the bad. And eating fermented foods helps make that happen. Not to mention that the enzymes in these fermented foods make it easier to digest foods like meat and other foods. So it kind of all comes together. This Wise Traditions diet is very all encompassing. And I will tell you this, Joe, this is one of my favorite things about it. It's not a diet of deprivation. There's nothing where I have to say, I can't eat that. No, I can, because all these foods in the whole world were given for our enjoyment, and a healthy gut can handle them all.
Yes, especially if they're grown properly, prepared properly. And I think that's where in our Western society we've sort of fallen down, haven't we? We've taken foods and then made them into something that's not food anymore, or else we haven't prepared it the way that traditional cultures have prepared it. So then it's difficult for us to digest. So talking about grains and things like that, what do your principles suggest with grains? That would be interesting for our listeners. Legumes.
Yes. Well, you are exactly right. We all think, for example, nuts and legumes and beans, and they're all so good for us. We just kind of eat them, at least people in the U.S. who try to be healthy eat them all the time, without realizing that nature has given a lot of these plants a special coating to kind of protect it from being eaten, I guess. I don't know. But there's kind of this anti-nutrient coating that's on these foods that makes them difficult to digest, just what you said. And so traditional peoples intuited this somehow. And so most of them had, if not all of them actually, that Dr. Price saw, had a way to prepare the grains and the legumes and the beans so that they could be digested well. So they would either soak or ferment or sprout these different seeds and nuts and beans and such, so that the anti-nutrients would be taken off and then, or minimized, I would say, and then the body could absorb the nutrients without the irritation, if you will, of those anti-nutrients. So I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, my mom's from Mexico. Okay. And we would always soak the beans overnight. You know, Mexico's known for kind of refried beans, beans on the side of any dish. You know, it's just a kind of a staple of all the people. But they knew to soak those beans overnight. And all you need is the right conditions, probably like warm water, maybe a touch of something acid like lemon or maybe apple cider vinegar, something to help kind of wear away that anti-nutrient, the phytic acid on the outside of the beans. And then the next day we would cook up the beans and nobody would have gas. Nobody would be uncomfortable and it wouldn't be irritating the digestive tract. So this is definitely one of the principles of the foundation, is that all beans, nuts, seeds, and grains need to be properly prepared for optimal digestion.
Yeah. And that's the secret, isn't it? I think all whole foods we should be able to handle. So sometimes it's a matter of preparing them better than we have been, or sometimes it's a matter of healing the gut so that we can go back to eating what we should be able to eat. So,
Yes. And there's a big trend here to avoid gluten at all costs. I understand why, because it's irritating people, but chances are these same people who believe they're gluten intolerant may be able to tolerate and benefit from, let's say, a bread like sourdough that's been fermented, properly fermented. I'm not talking about sourdough bread where they just add vinegar and make it taste sour.
Proper old-fashioned sourdough.
Exactly, where you get a starter from a friend and you make that and it's, amazing. So, I would love to see more people embrace all of the foods that are out there. But you're right, the gut needs to be strong as well. And if that's compromised, then there may be other steps that need to be taken before they can even venture into the Wise Traditions diet. But I can tell you this, we are constantly getting testimonials from people who change their diet to kind of follow these principles, and they find that they regain their health.
Yes.
Their fertility returns, their energy returns. It's a beautiful thing.
And it's interesting to see the difference when people bring good fats back into their diet. Do you want to talk about fats a little?
Oh my gosh, I love fat.
Me too.
I'm so glad you brought it up. It's funny because I think sometimes we think there are trends here in the U.S. too of going carnivore, or eating high protein diet. I love protein. Protein is great. But what Dr. Price noticed was that people ate large amounts of fat everywhere he went all around the world. Now, the percentages varied. Maybe there was more fat eaten by the Alaskans, for example, than maybe the Kenyans, but they all had more fat than the standard American diet of his day in the 1930s. So this is definitely something that's essential for brain health and for all the synapses to connect properly. The brain is mostly fat. So we are big proponents of fat. And this is before the keto train caught fire. But they're getting the right idea out there, right? People are looking for these whole real foods and fat in particular, and that's fantastic. We couldn't be happier. So yes, that's one of our principles too, is to include a good percentage of fat in the diet.
When you come over to Australia, you're hoping to visit the indigenous people here, and you and I both have an interest in what Hope for Health are doing up in Northern Territory. At the moment, they're having a retreat, which I'm about to go to tomorrow to help with the cooking. But I'm just loving seeing the photos, because I love how they are teaching the white people at the retreat. The indigenous people are teaching the white people about their cultural foods and traditional foods. And one of the things that they're sharing with them is the importance of fat in their diet, in their traditional diet, and how when certain blossoms came out on the trees, they knew that was the time to harvest certain foods, because that was the time of year when those foods had the most fat. So, for instance, the stingray, at a certain time of year, certain blossoms have come out. That's the time to hunt for stingray because they're fatty. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see, just to learn from them, to see how that they ate that way and how it helped their health for so many years. And when they moved over, as they moved over to the Western diet, that's when all their chronic illness began. And it's so good to see them embracing the traditional foods again and going back to what they used to know and sharing that with our culture as well. So it's really exciting. So I'm really
so exciting.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hopefully going up there with you.
Yes.
Do you want to tell everyone about your trip to Australia and what you'll be doing? Because I think there'll be a lot of people interested to hear you speak.
Oh, I'm so excited. So I want to back up by saying the foundation, the Weston A. Price Foundation, sent me to Kenya because a Maasai warrior in a tribe in a village called Oithi contacted us. And
That's so exciting.
I know. He came across our literature and he said, please send someone over. We're all getting sick. He said, I have diabetes. My wife has asthma. And he really resonated with the fact that we have all kind of come away from our traditional ancestral health practices. And he saw it in his own village. There was suddenly a shop up the street where people were getting sodas and chai tea and with lots of refined sugar in it, And so I had the privilege of going over there. And when I was there, Joe, I got to interview a man, a Maasai warrior who was over 100 years old.
Wow.
I know. And so I felt so humbled. And this was kind of the beginning of my podcasting career too. I was like, I want to record this. I just think it's fascinating. And of course he couldn't speak English. So we had like 2 translators because he spoke, I don't know, Ma, and then someone else spoke Swahili. And we were trying to, get it back.
That's amazing.
But it was amazing. And he was able to say, when I was young, he's like, we didn't get sick. We just were hale and hearty, and we would like play in the rain. And if we got a shiver, we would just drink milk from the cow, meaning raw milk, Yeah. And he said, and now my grandchildren have to put a coat on because it's going to rain, but we didn't do that, And so it was just fascinating. So I got it in my head after going to Kenya and after going to Peru. I was like, I need to go to Australia because Dr. Price went there and I'm on a mission to follow in his footsteps because he went with 2 things in mind. Well, actually, really, he went just to learn. Well, I'm going with 2 things in mind to help remind people about traditions that they can learn from. Just as you were saying, these Aboriginal people are teaching the white people, like we all can benefit from their wisdom. And number 2, I'm going to learn myself because I know that there are people who still have those traditions in their hearts and I want to learn from them. And then I want to share that information for the world. So the foundation is going to let me record some podcasts. And of course, I'm going to walk carefully when I go into these Aboriginal communities, understanding it's a different culture and only talking to those who want to talk to me. But I hope to record some interviews for the podcast. And also I'm launching a YouTube channel this summer where I hope to have some footage for that. And I love what Hope for Health is doing because they are helping people reconnect with their own heritage and giving them the freedom to be empowered to live as they were meant to live. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So to be specific, I think what I'm going to have to do is send you my itinerary, Joe, so that maybe you can post it on your website because it's very involved. I'm going to be in Melbourne and Sydney and Cairns and then Elko Island and Arnhem Land. Like I'm going all over the place because I'm there for a whole month and I wanted to take the time to really connect with people and yes, do some talking, but do a lot of learning as well.
I love that. There's some really interesting things on your itinerary. I think there's a dinner in Sydney that's Indigenous foods dinner, and I think you're doing talks about children's health and also like quite a variety of things. So
it is.
It's very exciting. I bet you're excited.
I am. And this is the good news is I'm partnering with experts in Australia. So it's not just going to be me, but people
that's right.
John Newton, who wrote The Oldest Foods on Earth, and
awesome.
Dr. Ron Ehrlich and Dr. Stephen Lin. And so I'm really excited. And you. So I'm going to get to be with some amazing people there. And yes, if people can look at the itinerary there on your website somehow, or you can add it.
I can put it in the show notes, definitely. Yeah.
Because I want them to come wherever possible. I think this information is so life-changing. And that's why I'm embarking on this trip. To be honest with you, Joe, I haven't fully raised all the funds I need to make it happen, but it is that important to me that I'm stepping out by faith because this needs to happen. So.
All right. Well, we will definitely share the love and tell everybody about it because it's, I think it's really important for all of us here as well to learn more about these things. We can get caught up in our everyday lives and not think too much about where our food comes from and, what it's doing to our bodies. And I think the people listening to this podcast are more aware, but there's so many people out there that are not. And it's, the more we can get the word out there, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we will finish up now because I think we've gone over half an hour, have we? I think we have. But I would just like to say a big thank you to you for all that you do. And the Weston A. Price Foundation has been so helpful to so many people. And I know probably 15 years ago I bought the Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, and that's where I first started to hear about Weston A. Price and everything. And that just really helped me when my kids were little and learning about real food and trying to get started down that track. So thanks for all you do. We do really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. I can't wait to see you in September.
Yes, I'm very excited. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jo.
Bye.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.